Hi everyone, Fran here at New Testament Explained. This video is going to go over the Sign of Jonah. Now this is part of a broader series that looks at the 8 passages that form Anthology 5 on the Edexcel New Testament Studies course, which is part of the A-Level Religious Studies. This is video 3 of 8, so make sure you're watching the other videos if you are studying the course, and as always, make sure you subscribe to the channel and the notification bell. As always, we're starting with an overview of the passage and where it appears, if it appears in other Gospels. Now, the Sign of Jonah follows straight on from Jesus and Beelzebub, which is video 2 of this series, so make sure you've watched that first. And what this passage does is very short. It makes 2 Old Testament references to make points about the kingdom of God and its arrival. One Old Testament reference is to that of Jonah, and the second is to that of Solomon. Now, this passage appears in Matthew, and it's Matthew 12, 38 to 45, but, big but, in Matthew's version, the Sign of Jonah refers to the crucifixion and resurrection. It makes a direct comparison between Jonah's kind of account in the Old Testament and the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. So Jonah spent 3 days in a giant fish, like Jesus would spend 3 days in the tomb, for example. But the crucifixion and resurrection references are not going to be in the Luke passage that we look at. Therefore, what we can perhaps deduce from that is that Luke's passage is perhaps inspired by the Q source, because it's in Matthew and it's in Luke, but it's not in Mark. So it's the idea that Matthew and Luke perhaps use the Q source to first come across this Bible passage, which again, you can use that to make a synoptic link in the course, comparing this topic 5.1 with topic 3.1. So this is the entire Bible passage for the Sign of Jonah. It's not a big passage. What I'm going to do is explain the Old Testament references, who is Jonah, who is Solomon and the Queen of the South, and then we'll look at what this passage suggests about the arrival of the kingdom of God in Luke's Gospel. So Jonah is tasked by God to go and warn the Nineveh that their city would be destroyed if they did not change their ways. Now, Solomon didn't want to do this, and what happens in the Old Testament passage is Jonah is swallowed by a giant fish, so that he arrives where the Nineveh are. But ultimately he warns them to change their ways. They do, and the city is saved. In the second Old Testament reference, we've got the Queen of the South, who you may hear referred to as the Queen of Sheba, who has heard about Solomon, who is a prophet, heard about his wisdom, and so she goes to him for advice, and she listens to him, listens to his wisdom. And what is similar in both of these passages then is the notion that people are listening to a person of authority, whether it be Jonah or Solomon. They are changing their ways and therefore being saved. And what perhaps Jesus is trying to get across in using these examples, and what perhaps Luke is as well in writing them in his gospel, is it's perhaps a warning to people that you also need to listen. In terms of when the kingdom of God is going to arrive then, this does have what we call an apocalyptic turn. It sounds quite doom and gloom if you do not listen. There's almost a sense of urgency that you've got to listen to the message of Jesus, or else there are going to be really negative consequences. Again, in Jonah, the consequence of not listening was that the city would be destroyed. So there is an apocalyptic undertone here. And this could be used to support consistent eschatology, the fact that the kingdom of God is arriving imminently and people need to change their ways in order to be saved, or else if you don't, the consequences are going to be bad for you. Hans Conselmann interprets this differently. He compares different Gospels that use this passage, and he compares this against Matthew in particular, and he looks at the fact that Luke takes out references to the crucifixion and resurrection, which are noted in Matthew's version of this story. And what Conselmann takes from that is the idea that Luke's trying to remove any sense of imminence and the end has started mentality, and that perhaps fits into the idea of the delayed parousia. You need to listen, you need to be believing in Jesus and his message, but there is almost a notion that by taking out the crucifixion and resurrection, it doesn't feel as imminent and as though it's going to happen literally any day now, which fits into this sort of long haul approach that Conzelman believes Luke was trying to set up. There is also a suggestion by Conzelman that the reason the parousia is delayed, which again is something that Luke is having to address in his gospel, this could be because of the faith in the church. So because in the sign of Jonah, like the city is not destroyed because they listen, maybe Luke's trying to suggest the reason Jesus has not arrived yet and that we've got this delayed parousia is that the Christian church are being faithful and therefore it has to be delayed to a later point, which is an interesting side point that can be used to suggest that this passage isn't about the kingdom of God arriving in the future, but more this notion of salvation history, that it's always existed. The ministry of Jesus has brought around a new age in relation to the kingdom of God, but when Luke was writing his gospel, there is this sense of now waiting for the final stage, which will be the parousia of Jesus. That then is the end of the analysis of the sign of Jonah. Again, the third passage in a series of 8 on Ornithology 5. As always, if you're not subscribed to the channel or the notification bell, make sure that you do. And I'll see you soon for more New Testament Explained.